Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the American Academy of Pediatrics and healthychildren.org. Today, we're discussing holiday safety and how to ensure your home is both festive and safe for your family this holiday season. Today, we'll offer safety tips on everything from holiday decor like string lights and flameless candles that take lithium coin batteries, live and artificial tree hazards, and potentially poisonous holiday plants like mistletoe berries to keep away from children. But before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so if you lose connection for any reason, you can watch the archived webinar on our website once we post it in a couple of days. If we can help you with any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat function to send us a message. And we will have time at the end of this webinar for questions and answers. To ask a question, please use the chat function. You can activate chat by clicking on the speech bubble at the bottom center of your screen or the person-shaped icon for mobile users. You can send in your questions at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. I'd like to introduce our host, Dr. Jennifer Shu. Dr. Shu is a practicing pediatrician, author, and mom in Atlanta. She is the co-author of Heading Home with Your Newborn and Food Fights, a frequent guest on national and local television, radio, and web-based programs. She's also served as the Living Well health expert for CNN.com, has contributed medical information to Baby Center and WebMD, and serves on the Parents Magazine Advisory Board. And finally, she is the medical editor of healthychildren.org, the official parenting website of the AAP. Welcome, Dr. Shu.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to everyone who's joining us today. And I cannot believe we are already talking about the holidays. Our expert today to talk more about some of the hazards that are often overlooked in the home during the holidays is Dr. Elizabeth Sinclair. Dr. Sinclair is a pediatric gastroenterologist and is certified in pediatrics by the American Board of Pediatrics. She is the medical director of the Feeding and Swallowing Clinic and co-medical director of the Center for Eosinophilic Gastrointestinal Diseases at UPMC Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. She's also an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Dr. Sinclair received her medical degree from Tufts University School of Medicine and completed her residency at Oregon Health and Sciences University Dornbecker Children's Hospital, followed by her fellowship at Emory University Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Dr. Sinclair's clinical and research interests include eosinophilic esophagitis, feeding disorders, foreign body ingestions, and advocacy. She has published multiple articles in peer-reviewed journals and is member of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the North American Society for Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition. Dr. Sinclair lives in Pittsburgh with her husband, son, and cat, and enjoys gardening and attending city events and festivals. Welcome, Dr. Sinclair.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So let's just get started about holiday safety and hazards. And one thing we wanted to talk about is decorating your home during the holidays. It is a tradition for many people and a sure way to get into the holiday spirit, but we know there are some hazards that can sometimes get overlooked that can land some children in the ER. What are some of the problems that you tend to see each year?
So we see button battery and lithium coin ingestions, magnets, small toy ingestions as well, sometimes uninflated balloons, holiday trees and plants, and we'll also touch on a few other non-choking hazards that include holiday hazards that land kids in the emergency department of the hospital.
So thanks for that broad overview. Let's talk a little bit about each one, since many of these objects could potentially be gifts for children or present at a holiday party. Why don't we talk first about small batteries?
So small batteries or button or coin batteries are present in many items. They can be in lights, string lights, toys, key fobs, garage door openers, thermometers, thermostat remote sensors. And these batteries, if swallowed, can get stuck in the esophagus and cause a very severe burn. And the complications relating to that can actually cause death in children. And so it's very important to make sure you're aware of where these batteries might be in your home. In children's toys, they tend to be secured with a screw as mandated by the CPSC. But in other items marketed to adults, sometimes it's just a pretty easy to open latch. You know, if that item falls on the floor, the latch opens up and the battery pops out, and a kid could pick it up and swallow it pretty quickly. And so the ones we worry about the most are the ones that are about the size of a quarter. The smaller ones are dangerous too, but not nearly as dangerous as the large ones because they do get stuck in the esophagus and can cause serious harm. You can check out healthychildren.org for a home safety walkthrough to look for examples on where to find these batteries in your home and make sure that they're secure. We'd also like to take a moment to mention our ongoing work with Duracell, who's co-sponsoring this webinar. The AAP has teamed up with Duracell on the Power Safely initiative to help educate parents, caregivers, and pediatric health professionals on the importance of keeping these lithium coin batteries away from small children because they can cause such a serious injury if they're swallowed. The AAP again recommends that family keep all products with these coins away from children and look for products that have child-resistant packaging and other safeguards, such as secured battery compartments. Duracell is making one with a bitter coating, which may be a deterrent, but just note that if it's swallowed, it won't prevent injury. Also note that a dead battery can still cause the same injury as a brand new battery. When you dispose of these batteries, wrap them in tape and take them to a battery recycling center. Or if that's not available, put them in your trash. Don't put them in your recycling bin. Wrapping them in tape decreases the fire risk in case they come into other metal contact in the trash, and it also is an additional deterrent to swallowing.
Excellent points. Let's talk a little bit more about some choking hazards. What other things might people want to keep in mind?
Sure. So any small objects, magnets, especially strong magnets. Note that the strong magnet sets that you may have seen, sometimes they're shaped like a cube, but made out of very tiny, very strong magnets, have actually been banned as of this summer. So if you have one of those in your home, we actually recommend you get rid of it. There's a risk of serious bowel injury if more than one of these magnets are swallowed, because they can find each other in the bowel and connect and cause significant injury to the bowel that would require surgery. You also want to look for any small toy parts, uninflated balloons, and if we're talking about some very specific holiday items, dreidels, depending on their size, can be a choking hazard. You also want to remove wrapping paper, bags, paper, and ribbons and bows after your gifts are open because they can pose a suffocation or choking hazard. And you want to avoid decorations that are sharp or breakable. We've had children who have ingested that prong and collar on Christmas ornaments, and we've had children eat the thin glass Christmas ornaments as well and swallow that glass. So you want to keep any tree trimmings with small removable parts out of the reach of the children to prevent swallowing or inhaling these small pieces, and avoid things that resemble candy or food that might tempt a young child to eat them. And then a few just general hazards if we're talking about fire hazards in terms of candle holders for Kwanzaa and Hanukkah. And then when you're cooking latkes in hot oil, you want to make sure that your children are away from the stove.
You mentioned fire hazards. What about when it comes to trees in the home that could potentially be a fire hazard? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so dry trees can be a fire hazard. When you purchase a live tree, you want to check for freshness. The needle should be really hard to pull off, and even though it's annoying, the sticky, sappy tree is a fresher tree than the dry tree. When you tap on the tree on the ground, only a few of the needles should really fall off. And you want to cut or have the place where you're buying it cut a few inches off the bottom of the trunk, the same way that you cut the stems of fresh cut flowers to improve the way that they'll absorb water before putting it in the stand, and make sure the stand is filled with water and that you watch that water level and continue to fill it like you would fresh flowers. If you have an artificial tree, you want to make sure that it's labeled fire resistant. When you set up a tree at home, you want to place it away from any fireplaces, radiators, or portable heaters, and you want to place it out of the way of traffic and not have it block doorways so it's not going to be knocked over accidentally in high traffic areas. You want to use a non-combustible or flame-resistant materials when you trim your tree. We don't usually recommend using real candles. You want to check all the lights before hanging them on a tree, even if you just bought them, because you want to make sure all the bulbs work and there are no frayed wires in case you get a defective set. You want to make sure there's no broken sockets or loose connections. And then be cautious about trimmings that might contain lead. You want to choose tinsel or artificial icicles that are plastic or made without lead. The light strands can sometimes contain lead in the bulb sockets and the wire coating, and sometimes it's in high amounts and you may not know this. So make sure the lights are out of the reach of young children who might try to put the lights in their mouth, and always wash your hands after handling them.
Okay, wow, I had not even thought about lead being a potential issue. What about decorative plants that people might have in the home during the holidays?
So decorative plants add a nice pop of color during the holiday season, but some of them can be poisonous. You want to keep in mind holly berries, mistletoe berries, the Jerusalem cherry, and poinsettias. Any of these can cause vomiting and diarrhea if ingested. They're usually not fatal, but they can cause significant discomfort and may require a trip to the hospital.
So if a child does get into one of these things, what would you recommend?
I would recommend calling the Poison Center. We're going to show the number next. They are an excellent resource for parents and providers. They really provide clear information on next steps and how much to worry. They can either reassure you if the ingestion is not dangerous, or they can tell you what the next steps are.
Okay, excellent. I think we got a sneak peek at the next topic, which is really scary, but with some preparation, we can prevent these injuries in children. But tell us a little bit about possible strangulation hazards.
So tags, strings, ribbons, string lights, all of those can pose a strangulation risk. And when you're talking about toys, you want a pull toy with a string that is shorter than 12 inches long. Anything longer than that can pose a strangulation risk. Garlands, electrical cords, and many of these things can also be tripping hazards.
What about just regular household objects that we might not necessarily think about, but children could come across during the holidays?
Yes. So when you're hosting a holiday party, it can be really easy to get distracted because you're so busy hosting. Children are really curious. They love to explore. Of a certain age, they love to put things in their mouth. And so you want to check the floors regularly for any small objects. This is really important both before and after the holiday party, when small items might have fallen onto the floor, or if they're older children who may have small items like jewelry or been playing with toys that have smaller parts. You want to do a quick scan of your home to make sure battery covers are secure on remote controls, key fobs, musical books, greeting cards. For many of those items, you can tape the back on if it's not secured with a screw. You want to store these items out of reach and out of sight as much as possible. And then remember that alcohol can be very poisonous to a young child. Remember to empty any unfinished drinks right away and get rid of the trash right away as well. Many children, go looking in the trash when they see something colorful. Trash containers that contain spoiled food, sharp objects, or batteries should have a child-resistant cover and really be kept out of a child's reach. You want to make sure that guests keep their purses and other bags that could hold potential hazards, including their own medications, out of your child's reach. Some folks, will get a high set of hooks or a coat hanger, or have them put their items in a room that has a secure closure on it. because some of your guests may not be used to being around children and may not be aware of the hazards that might lurk in their coat pockets or purses, and may just leave them on the floor for any child to explore. And then finally, when you are preparing for a party or cleaning up afterwards, you want to worry about cleaning supplies. Especially worrisome is dishwasher detergent. The powder, if it's swallowed, that powder can do significant damage to the esophagus. And then drain cleaners are also especially dangerous. So you want to make sure those are up and out of a child's reach. I especially mentioned the dishwasher detergent and the drain cleaners because they're often, below a sink. And if that cabinet gets left open, a child could access them.
So those are great tips. What about if you go visit somebody else's house with your children? I mean, obviously you'd want to do the things that you just mentioned at your own house, but are there any other things to consider?
Yes, of course, you want to remember that the person who's hosting the party you're attending may also not have child-proof their home to the same degree that you might, depending on the age of their children or no children in their home. So you want to keep an eye out for danger spots like unlocked cabinets where things like breakable items or cleaning supplies may lurk, unattended purses, stairways, or hot radiators as well. And, especially breakable items or heavy items that might be set lower within a child's reach that the hosts may not have realized. You also want to be aware of tall furniture like dressers, tables, chests, and TV stands and bookcases. That can be a tip over hazard, as not everybody secures those items to the walls as recommended. If a piece of furniture or an appliance falls on a small child, it can cause a really severe crush injury or cause suffocation because of the weight of the object. And if it hits them in the head, they can end up with serious brain injury. So you really want to watch out for tip over injuries as well.
Yeah, so it might be helpful when you do go visit somebody to do a walkthrough and see if you notice any hazards right away to keep your child, away from. Sometimes it may help to have a certain zone that you make sure is child friendly and designate that as a child safe area. So thank you for all that. We do have some time to answer questions from our attendees, and I'm just going to go through these and take a look. But one question that came up pretty quickly is it best just to keep all button batteries out of the house since they can have such scary effects on children?
I mean, certainly that's ideal, but I'm practical. I know that can really be difficult. And so you really just want to make sure that anything with a button battery has a secure closure on it. And soon that will be the norm. Reese's Law was actually just passed this summer that's going to require secure closures on any object with a button battery. But, the turnover in products is going to take time. So anything you have in your home probably is not falling under that law just quite yet. And anytime you're changing a battery, I've had a lot of cases where the family said, oh, I was up at the counter and while I was changing it, my child pulled it off the counter. I do all my battery changes in a locked room, honestly, so that my child doesn't ever have access to it. I immediately tape up the dead batteries and put them in the trash. And you just want to know where they are in your home because you may not even realize that it's a button battery in one of the items that you've bought. You may have thought, oh, I assume that was a AAA, and then you undo the cover and it's actually a button battery.
Yeah, even in some of those children's books that have sound, there are definitely some small batteries in there. Another listener asked, what if my child does swallow something such as a battery or a magnet or cleaning supplies? Should I try to make them throw up? I mean, it used to be that we would recommend Ipecac or things that would make people vomit. What's recommended in these situations?
We don't usually recommend inducing vomiting. Most of the research has shown that it's really not effective. If your child does swallow a button battery and are over the age of 12 months, we do recommend giving honey about a teaspoon every 10 minutes for up to 6 doses because that can potentially decrease the risk of injury, but you want to head to the ED as soon as humanly possible. And you can call the poison center on the way as well, but if it's a button battery, a magnet, or a cleaning supply, you don't even, I mean, you can call your PCP, but I would recommend you find an emergency department. Do not delay.
Okay, so head to the ER and then call poison control on the way, see if there's anything you might be able to do, such as that honey. So regular household honey, a teaspoon every 10 minutes, you said, huh? Okay, so I'm
Children
gonna
12 months and older because of the
12
risk of
months and older.
botulism.
Okay, great. So that's definitely something I'm going to make sure I keep in the house then. Another listener asked about a blue dye that supposedly can make button batteries safer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So there is some product kind of under development that would have these button batteries with an indicator. If the child were to put it in their mouth would turn blue. Now that would tell you that the child had it in their mouth and potentially swallowed it, and tell you that you need to go to the ED, the emergency department, immediately. It will not prevent the injury. It will really only notify you that it occurred, since up to 25 to 30% of these button battery ingestions are actually unwitnessed, and the families don't always know that it happened, or they know that the child swallowed something, but they don't know that it was a battery. So those products aren't available yet, and it, again, won't prevent an injury, but it may let you know that it happened and have you get care quicker.
Yeah, I hear that story a lot, not necessarily for batteries, but there, a lot of small Legos were around and we don't know how many there were, and some might be missing, and maybe my child ate them. So it's really important to try to keep track and keep your child separate from some of these small items that they could swallow. But at what age can you stop worrying about a kid and choking hazard? Is there a certain time when you can relax a little bit more and leave, things out?
It depends on, the age and developmental stage of your child. Usually under 6. Once they're over 6, they're usually less likely to be putting things in their mouth that don't belong. They're usually a little bit bigger and less likely to have something get stuck in their esophagus. Of course, there's always exceptions. If you have a particularly petite child, or a child who has developmental issue or behavioral issues who tends to put things in their mouth, then that age is not going to be accurate. But overall, children over 6 are at less risk.
What about some people who recommend, checking to see if the small object can fit in a toilet paper roll, for example, or in this tube that's specially made to see if an item is considered to be a choking hazard? What do you think about those kind of guides?
I think they can be a guide. That is how the Consumer Product Safety Commission determines the safety of some of these objects. But with increased kind of technology and development in toys, there have been a number of irregularly shaped toys that don't fit in the tube but are still a significant choking hazard. And so I wouldn't use it as a hard and fast rule. It can be a loose guideline. And then there are also objects that change their shape. If they fit in the small tube but they expand with water, like those expandable water beads, then those are actually incredibly dangerous, but they would technically fit in the tube.
Can you talk a little bit more about those water beads? What do you mean by that?
Sure. So there are these products that are marketed as children's toys. I think there are some that are also marketed as sort of wellness aromatherapy beads, but they start out very small. And then when they expand, they can expand so that they are quite large, larger than a marble, larger than a quarter. And as they expand, if swallowed in the gut, which is a wet environment, it can cause bowel injury and obstruction. And we've seen a number of cases. That's sort of an emerging danger to children that as a new product was developed.
Okay, so you're talking about water beads expanding. Are there certain foods that might do that also? I mean, I guess what comes to mind might be, do marshmallows expand, or those circus peanuts, anything like that parents might want to be concerned about that's not your typical choking hazard that we consider, like nuts and, whole grapes, hot dogs.
Those items don't usually expand, in a wet environment once they're in the gut, but because of their softness, marshmallows and circus peanuts could be a choking hazard for young children because they're not able to chew them, and because they start out rather large. If you're talking normal sized marshmallows, mini marshmallows are usually pretty safe because they dissolve pretty well, but a large marshmallow could be a choking hazard.
Okay, yeah, and so the marshmallow challenge where you see how many marshmallows you can
Right.
stuff into your mouth, not a good idea.
Not recommended.
Okay, so you talked about great ways to keep some of these objects, such as button batteries, lithium, magnets, etc., out of the reach of children under the age of 6, particularly, who are at the highest risk of choking and maybe putting things into their mouths that they shouldn't. Have you found any successful ways to talk to these children or to counsel these children so that they know not to do it? Or developmentally, is that easy?
Developmentally, it's pretty challenging. I mean, developmentally, a child doesn't even know the difference at most, at ages 4 and under, between a coin and a button battery. I mean, we've had children where we ask them what they swallowed and they tell us it's a penny, and we get in there and it's a quarter, and those 2 coins are different colored even. And so developmentally, that's not terribly reliable. I mean, you can certainly start that conversation the same way you're starting conversations about privacy and stranger danger and things like that. But it's not, I wouldn't rely on that counseling to your child to still not do it. I mean, they're still at risk given their age and developmental stage.
What about some toy products, such as there are these types of sand that kids may play with, or clay, putty? Examples might be the kinetic sand, Play-Doh, silly putty, silly string even. Do you see these as hazards to children?
It depends on the item. We don't see it as much in terms of a swallowing risk, because most of them dissolve and are non-toxic, especially Play-Doh. I mean, Play-Doh can contain gluten, so we don't recommend it for children who have celiac disease, but it's not usually a choking hazard. They don't usually contain harmful dyes. I would look at the age range on that item, as Play-Doh, it says, I think, ages 2 and 3 and older, and some of the other items may recommend it for an older child if there's a concern. But usually those items are not the highest, the most common things we're seeing causing issues.
Any concern about slime type products or slime type things that people might make in their own homes?
I would just be careful about the products you use to make them, the ones that are made out of flour and water, obviously not dangerous. If you're using food coloring, you want to make sure it's actual food coloring and not some kind of unsafe dye. And then I think there are some slimes made with kind of like Elmer's glue, which I believe is also non-toxic. So you just want to be careful that each individual ingredient is safe.
Excellent. Thank you for all that really useful information. I'd like to turn things back over to our moderators at the AAP and thank everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shu and Dr. Sinclair. We want to remind participants to register on healthychildren.org to receive our newsletter, a personalized homepage, and special offers. And don't forget to follow healthychildren.org on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Keep an eye out for a quick survey and let us know what you found most helpful and any suggestions you may have. And a very, very special thank you to our sponsor, Duracell. Thanks again for joining us.